What's up, everybody? This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. I'm here with my co-host Ian Gibson. How are you?
Doing good. 2 out of my 3 favorite teams won, and we'll get into that.
Yeah, it was a shellacking by the Gators, or by the Vols against the Gators, and it was rough to watch. I actually woke up pretty depressed this morning. So one more game left of the year for them. So thank God we don't have to watch that much longer. But so this week, week 13 was actually a relatively light week, and then there was in the games that we highlighted, there was actually a lot of blowouts.
Yeah.
So it ended up being one of the easier weeks to research this stuff because most of these games were out of hand, more than halfway through. There was really only a couple of games that were close, and that was really just the Kansas State Utah game. Surprisingly, that Pitt Georgia Tech game late got closer, and then that BYU Cincinnati game was interesting all the way through, actually, for the most part. But let's get into it. So week 13, college football. We're gonna recap all these games here. The first game we had was Missouri, Oklahoma. This Oklahoma defense it is so stout. And, the surprise of the game was the fact that Perbula was able to play. Yep. He had that dislocated ankle against Vanderbilt, and you thought he was done for the year. And he came back somehow in this game, and he played all right. He wasn't terrible, but, this Oklahoma defense is no joke. Out of the top defenses in the country, I feel like because of who they've played and who they've been able to keep in check, outside of that Ole Miss game, they were really, they really kept almost every offense in check they've played, including Alabama, which is one of the better offenses in the country. So, this Oklahoma team, while not offensively gifted right now, outside of maybe Satania, Mateer's kind of still, not at full go like he was at the beginning of the year. But, he's still a good quarterback for them, and he still makes plays with his legs as well. And, credit to Missouri for staying in this game because they had a shot at the end where they were down close and they could have got it to a one-score game, but couldn't score there late. So Oklahoma goes on to win. They're 9-2, and if they win next week against LSU, they're not going to the SEC championship game, but that locks them up for a playoff spot. And, again, I said this last week. I feel like it's the same this week. Their defense is good enough to play against any team in the country. And I feel like that makes them super dangerous and keeps them in any game if they get into the playoffs. So, anything is possible once you get in the tournament. And I feel like this Oklahoma team is still right there in the mix for everything. Even though they won't get to the SEC championship, it doesn't matter. And it's proven. Ohio State didn't get there last year either, and they still won it. You just have to go on a run, which I think this team is capable of. But Ian, your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, in this game, it's showing Oklahoma is having one of the best defenses in the country. And we knew that, especially with the defensive mind of Venable. Missouri, especially with Perbula, you got to feel for Perbula because you're coming back from an ankle injury and you got to face Oklahoma's defense in your first game back. That is beyond insane. But for Oklahoma, they did everything they were supposed to in this game, especially defensively. Obviously, offensively, there was still, a lot left to be desired. But this is kind of serving as, how dangerous they can be going in because their 2 losses this year are to Ole Miss and Texas. And both of those were, the Texas game was technically 2 scores, but they held that offense in check. I was there. That offense was barely moving unless they had positive field position. And it was more or less to the offense. But as we always say, defense wins championships. If you can't score, you can't win. And I think Oklahoma is the embodiment of that. So they are doing a good job of, holding teams, making sure there's not as many explosive plays against them. And they did that against Missouri, especially towards the end. But yeah, great game for Oklahoma's defense. Offensively, obviously, you want to see more firepower as we're getting down the stretch. But all in all, they get the win. And yeah, I believe, they win out, they'll, more than likely get that spot in the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, I feel like a 2-loss SEC team is pretty much a lock. Last year, the teams that were 3 losses were like they were fighting about if they should get in. So I feel like this team is fully capable of that. Like with 2 losses, that they should be deserving of to go, especially because the Ole Miss loss is to a 1-loss team, and then the Texas loss is not as good, but it's still like Texas right now is, I believe, 8-3. So like that's not a terrible loss. And like you said, those games were close. And the defense, that's really is the key. Like this team with that defense is super, like it is perfect for a tournament like this. Like you want to have a defense that can shut down not only the passing attack, but can shut out running backs. In this game, Missouri, they hugely relied on their run all year, and in this game, Hardy didn't do anything barely, and then Roberts did nothing. So like you stop 2 of the best running backs in the country, and then you just go after Perbula the whole time. They got 2 interceptions from him, and they also were able to get 4 sacks. And they are just a magnet for getting sacks. I mean, we talked about it. The Auburn game, obviously the 10 sacks. Last week they had a bunch of sacks. Like they just get to the quarterback better than probably any other team in the country, and that's a huge bonus when you're playing these games, especially if what Oklahoma's been good at is taking advantage of the turnovers and getting into short fields and scoring on them. So let's move on. Okay, we're going to move to Rutgers, Ohio State. A blowout, like we said, there was a bunch of these going on, so we'll go through this relatively quickly. Not much to say here. Julian Sand had a decent game, not a ton of crazy yards. The defense looked really stout for Ohio State. They kind of kept Rutgers' offense in check for the most part. I think they had 147 total yards to Ohio State's 430. Do you have any thoughts on this one before we move on?
No, it was, kind of what we expected with Ohio State. It was definitely getting close into the half, but they did a good job of just, they didn't even really need third downs. I think they only had like less than 10 third downs the whole game, and they completed half of them because they were just averaging so many yards per carry. And, games, Bo Jackson, James Peoples, those guys were just running all over Rutgers defense. So saying, yeah, he had a good game. It wasn't like 500-yard game. I think he only had like 150, which is still pretty good. But you didn't really need to in this game, and the running game just kind of, carried them there. But yeah, Ohio State, did what they, should have done against this Rutgers teams, and they get the blowout win.
Yeah, and like, it's crazy. Like the first game of the year, Ohio State plays the number 1 team in the country, and literally ever since then, they have like not been tested outside of maybe like the Washington game, and it's been kind of smooth sailing for a whole season, which you don't normally see. I mean, the Big Ten is so bad, like outside of the top 4 teams, where it's like that's the problem. And that's why anyone that like says they're a Big Ten fan, I'm just like, man, like, the teams that are good do well, but like those bad teams are so atrociously bad. Like, you got Maryland, you got Purdue, you got Minnesota, you got Rutgers, you got just a whole litany of bad teams. I mean, Nebraska is not very good. You got just at Northwestern, like it's just Michigan State. I mean, it's like there's like 10 bad schools there. Like, so all these good teams can just rack up wins. And especially with like a team like Indiana or like just certain teams, Michigan hasn't even played anybody. Outside of Ohio State this week, they have not played anybody outside of like maybe Oklahoma, and that was a non-conference game. The rest of it, they're in conference games. They don't play anybody just by schedule. They didn't play Penn State. Michigan didn't play Indiana. They didn't play Oregon. Like, how does Michigan not play all these teams outside of Ohio State? Kind of ridiculous. I don't even think Michigan played Illinois, right? I don't think they did.
No, I don't believe so.
Yeah, I didn't think they did. So they literally missed out on like 4 of the top like 6 teams in the Big Ten, and yet we're supposed to think this is a good team. I don't know. I mean, like, I'm gonna wait and see what Michigan does this week against Ohio State to really be like, oh yeah, it's a good team. But like, I don't think they deserve to be up there to like potentially be in the playoff. Like, if they beat Ohio State, I think they should be in, right? Wouldn't that like make sense? But I don't think they're that good of a team. I don't think they're going to, but like, I don't know.
It would be the chaos scenario, yeah.
Yeah, because if that happens, that means Ohio State gets in. They still go to the Big Ten championship, and then, well, actually no, because does Michigan only have 1 conference loss? So they would jump Ohio State, right?
Yes, they would.
Oh man, so you're right. That's an ultimate chaos theory because then it would be Michigan and Indiana. Ooh. I don't know. I don't think Michigan's going to beat Ohio State. I just don't think they're that good of a team. They barely beat Northwestern. They like needed a miracle to beat them. And I think Bryce Underwood will eventually be a really good quarterback. I think in like, a year or two, like we'll see him. We'll be like, yeah, this is like one of those guys. But right now, I don't know. There's just not much to that offense outside of their running game. And like Bryce Underwood can make some throws, but he makes mistakes. And the passing attack is, like the wide receiver core is not that great for them. So let's move on. Miami, Virginia Tech. Miami, it's funny in this game, it was actually a lot closer than that final score shows because Vatek was like kicking onside kicks at the end.
Yeah.
And Miami, I guess they realized that they need style points because they put the pedal to the metal and like tried to get another touchdown there late. It was 4th and 2 at the like 30-yard line with 26 seconds left, and they threw the ball. And like, you would hardly ever see that from most teams, but they realized that they needed to score. They needed to win by more than just 10 points because it would look kind of bad. But most people realize, that was a closer game than, it being a 17-point game. But still, it was funny that they had to do that. Beck looked fine. I thought they, he put up huge numbers, 27 of 32 for 324 TDs. He didn't have a pick, which, that's always his downfall. He's throwing bad interceptions. But Malachi Toney had a big game, 146 yards. I will say, like, obviously I don't like Miami, but, like, this kid is good. Toney, like, he is very versatile, and he's very smart. I think that's the other thing is, like, I've noticed about him, he's very, like, heads up on a lot of things and makes a lot of, like, smart moves to, like, give the advantage to his team. I just saw him on one thing, during the highlight reel of, like, he was back to take a punt return, and he was like moving closer up on where the punt would get to him so that the defense drew to him and not where the ball was. And he's doing fair catch as he's doing that. And I know it's a little thing, but he's an 18-year-old kid. So like, you don't really expect that type of heady thing. And it went in the end zone. I mean, it's a small thing, but those are the small things that make the difference in certain games like this. Like this could have been a lot closer game, and little things like that make a difference. But I don't know. Vatek coming off the fact that they fired their coach, they didn't really have much hope in this game. They're 3-8, I believe. Yeah, 3-8. So season's been over for them for several weeks. Miami gets the win, but next week we'll talk about it on Wednesday. That Miami Pitt game becomes a monster game for both teams. So, Ian, your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, and Miami was just making the right plays. They're averaging well over 5-6 yards of play, and that's where like those third down and short scenarios came in. That's where they didn't really need to open the playbook and have Beck throwing risky passes because it was mostly out slant routes, that kind of thing. And obviously with the talent of Tony, he was able to make those big plays and rip them open. So it was a lot of high percentage passing, which obviously is Miami's bread and butter. The running game was good, but it really wasn't as necessary because they were just getting enough separation between the defenders. And yeah, for Vodtech, I mean, they definitely tried. I'll say that, but obviously they're, shorthanded. It's one of those, throwaway seasons that they're in, and they didn't really have, the same magic they did against Miami last year. But yeah. Miami pulls away, and, like you said, that Pitt game becomes even more important now.
Yeah, it's huge. Okay, moving on. This is another stinker. Louisville, SMU. It's funny. I was like looking at this highlight package, and I'm like, why did Louisville get smoked here? Like last year, this game was super close. It was back and forth, and like one or two highlights into the package, and it's because Miller Moss didn't play. And I'm like, oh, no wonder. And so he had some kind of like freak accident or something happened. So he didn't play at all this week. And he was like potentially like the emergency backup if they needed to, but he just couldn't play. And the guy that was in for him, he's just, he's not a starter. This guy, Deuce Adams, had 94 yards passing. And then Kevin Jennings went off. And like I would expect that this game would have been a shootout with Miller Moss. It probably would have been like a 30, 31 to like 28 game or something like that. But, the Cardinal offense was just nowhere to be found. And it's a shame because their season's done. And, they have the Kentucky game next week, so maybe they can make the most of it. But, they had a lot to play for there, and who knows what could have happened. But now SMU – with everything to play for, because SMU is now right there in the mix for the ACC championship game. Like if they beat Cal and I think Pitt loses, then they get in, right? Because they've got the tiebreaker with Miami, right?
Yes, I believe so. I didn't go through this chaos scenarios today, but I believe that's one of the situations. Obviously, when we do the show Wednesday, I'll have all that ready.
Yeah, I think we're gonna wait till Wednesday because there's like allegedly the ACC tiebreakers are like like really absurd to the point of like ridiculousness. So we'll wait till Wednesday for that. But like I said, SMU now has everything to play for, and I think people wrote them off when they lost that Wake game, and now you look at Wake, and Wake is, I believe, 8-3. Like it's not that bad of a loss now when you look at it. So credit to SMU for really getting everything back on track, and they're third in the ACC. And literally, like I said, if Miami beats Pitt, SMU has a tiebreaker over Miami, and then SMU would go ahead. But that's also depending on what happens with Virginia. Virginia plays Virginia Tech, so we'll talk about that on Wednesday. Okay, next game we've got. Actually, do you have any thoughts on this game? Sorry, I didn't go to you.
Not really, because I mean, there's not much to say. Louisville was kind of shorthanded, so SMU took advantage. They doubled up in yardage. Jennings went off, and there's not a whole lot to say about this one.
Okay, next one we've got our beloved alumni, our alma mater. USF wins 48-18. It was funny because I saw a lot of people complaining because it was like close at one point, and then USF just went off. Byron Brown again, another monster game, 353 yards. Just huge play after huge play to Ruben, who was just like unstoppable outside of that one fumble loss he had. But whatever, one play, it's not going to hurt us. But Singleton had a huge game. Nakai Davenport had a huge game. Byram had 5 TDs, He had over 400 yards, just monster game. And the defense, outside of that first little bit, I think they were fine after that. Like, they really didn't allow anything till the fourth quarter and until the game was kind of like decided. But UAB still got some decent yards, 382 total, but it never felt like they were really that in danger in this game. Once in the second half, USF was kind of rolling at that point. Kitna for UAB, their quarterback, threw a lot of interceptions. Gaskin had an interception. Then he got thrown out of the game because of a targeting call. And then who else had Rucker had an interception. Mac Harris had an interception. So it was, honestly, it was a team effort. And considering that, like, I got the Bucks game on, so if I lose,
you're good.
So, so this is live on Sunday night for anyone that's watching on YouTube after this is recorded. So, I feel like this team came to play. And Ian, what are the scenarios for USF right now?
So for USF, they need a lot of help. Tulane has to. Oh, geez, hang on. Hang on. Let me get it back up. I think Tulane has to lose to Charlotte. Navy has to Navy has to lose to Memphis. Navy has to lose to Memphis, and North Texas needs to win out because then they would win the tiebreaker. I
think there's another scenario also where it's USF wins out, Navy loses to Memphis, and then the other one is not Charlotte and Tulane, but North Texas and Temple. If Temple beats North Texas, then USF can go. So, I mean, there are some scenarios where USF can go. And I think the most likely, if it were to happen, would be the Temple beating North Texas and Memphis winning. That seems like the most likely scenario. I don't know if it will happen. It probably won't happen, but I think that seems like it could be a good chance because Temple is not as bad as Charlotte. Like, Charlotte is probably one of the worst teams in all of college football. And, but Temple has somewhat of a pulse, and I can see them and it really with North Texas, what I've said all year is winning the turnover battle. Like, if you can win the turnover battle with them, you have a really good shot of beating them because a lot of what they do is predicated on short fields and scoring quickly, and then, kind of getting a huge advantage because of that. If you can eliminate the turnovers and then also probably get one or two from them, forcing them into mistakes, you have a shot. But do you have any thoughts on this USF game?
Well, it was definitely this whole game in general was interesting. The whole thing going on with UAB and the meeting. There was honestly a discussion whether the game was going to be played with
we didn't talk about that. Go ahead and mention what happened before the game.
Yeah, so from what I understood was a player, it started with 3 players, one in particular got in a fight with 2 of them Friday, didn't get smoothed over, and then at that team breakfast, he tried to stab 2 of them. Police got called in, he's arrested, and then there was a legit discussion whether they should play, because the game was like 3 hours after that. Yeah. So there was a legit discussion whether they were just going to postpone it or forfeit the game, which, I mean, hindsight being what it was, might have been, the best case scenario because there was just too much going on for UAB. But with the game itself, USF did their typical thing, and it annoys me, but I mean, they're winning with it. They didn't have the best first half in the second quarter, but once they got to the third, fourth quarter, that's when they just turned on the Jets and outran UAB. I mean, Brown again had a great game. The running game with Davenport did good, and Rubin's kind of just making a star of himself these last couple of games. The defense really stepped up after that first quarter. They got the 3 interceptions, and it was they, like I said, second half they started to settle in. They wore down UAB, and they did the typical thing of just wearing them out and winning in the second half. But good win for USF, and I believe the scenario would be, let's see, they need to, Tulane has to lose. Tulane needs to lose. North Texas needs to lose, and East Carolina needs to lose. And Navy needs to. Oh wait, no. Tulane, Navy, and East Carolina need to lose, and then USF would win a tiebreaker. But destiny's out of their control right now.
Well, I'm not exactly sure, because what I saw today was through USF Sideline Network, and their account said that USF needs to win, and then if Navy loses to Memphis, and then North Texas loses, then USF would go. That they don't even need Tulane to lose.
Oh, okay.
That's what I've heard. I don't know for sure because I haven't looked it up outside of that. So it could be that, but again, we'll discuss this further on Wednesday when there's more, like we get more research on this, because we're just right now talking about the recap of these games. So let's move on to USC Oregon. Man, this game was like back and forth, and then like Oregon just kind of like took over at the end, and it was so disappointing because USC was like making some plays, and Maeva had a decent game, and I was like, thinking that they could get there, and then Oregon late. The game was a 35-27 game, and Oregon scores a late touchdown to go up 2 scores, and that was it. Like, because when you're down 2 scores late, it's not, you don't have much of a chance there unless it's a miracle like Kansas State, Utah, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But no, I mean, it's a shame because this was a playoff eliminator, like we talked about coming into it. Whoever won this game was going to have a really good shot at getting the playoff, and I really think Oregon now, with just the Washington game, has pretty much locked it up. They just need to win that game and they're in. But now USC, losing 3 games, I don't think they have a shot. And it's a shame because it was a good year by USC. They played well. They beat Michigan pretty handedly, and they just couldn't make the most of this year. And it's a tough pill to swallow, but USC is just not right there yet. They're not as good as they probably want to be. And it's a shame because like the offense is good. Like they're putting up points. They're one of the best offenses in the country. And the defense just, I don't know, struggles in a lot of these games. I mean, they gave up 42 points. Like you can't give 42 points to your opponent. Like you're not going to win most of those games. I don't know. Credit to Oregon. This Oregon team is really good. Like I am a fan of Dante Moore, and Dan Lanning's got these guys ready to play, and they're going to be a real dangerous team in the playoff. Last year I think they won so many games in a row that it was like kind of like, oh, it's like they're going to be straight to the championship game, and then they got smoked by Ohio State. So maybe this way they're a little under the radar. They'll have like potentially a home playoff game if they beat Washington, and then anything is possible. They win that game, and who knows what happens from there. But your thoughts on this game, Ian?
Yeah, and this was kind of a game where Oregon showed they know how to win these games. They've been in these games before. They have figured out a way to win these. And USC is still, they put their best effort out there, but Oregon just flat out had the better team, had the better game plan right now, and they found a way to to get into that secondary. The third level secondary was where the Achilles heel was shown for USC's defense, and they attacked it and exploited it. Moore had a really good game for Oregon, and yeah, for them, like I said, they just found a way to win, and they added enough distance to where USC just had to open, the playbook shrunk for them. They had to start making big plays. They couldn't really run their offense. Lemon did all he could. They had to, the offense, again, it was a good game for USC. It's just they ran into a better Oregon team.
Yeah, and then the surprise of this game was Tanook Hines, the freshman, had a monster game and had several explosive catches that went for 30 plus yards, and it's just a shame. They put up a decent performance, and like you said, they were out of their elements as far as their offensive game plan there, and they had to kept throwing from behind, and it just wasn't going to happen. Okay, moving on to speaking of that Kansas State Utah game. What a game! Dude, nearly 100 points total between the two, back and forth all game. Kansas State has the lead for most of it. Utah comes back. Then Kansas State goes up in the fourth quarter. And just it was, honestly, I felt like Kansas State was going to win this game when they went up in the fourth quarter. I'm like, oh, okay, they got control of this. And then there was 3 or 4 minutes left. And then Utah just, I don't know. It was kind of amazing. And it also helps that it was a home game. So you had the crowd behind you, but man, Joe Jackson for Kansas State went off. He had nearly 300 yards of rushing yards, 3 TDs. Avery Johnson didn't really have a great game through the air, but was running the ball pretty well. He had a huge run at one point. They really didn't need much because Jackson was running the ball so well. Even their other running back, Martin, had a good game. So, they were gashing Utah all game. And then Utah, conversely, was gashing them as well. It was neither team defensively could stop the either team's running attack. And, there was over, 700 yards of rush yards, which is the most insane total I've ever seen outside of maybe a Navy, Army game or something, or Navy, Air Force game. But wow, that is just an insane total, 700 yards of rushing yards. But no, Utah didn't give up here. They kept coming. They made enough plays to win it. And, Utah is still in the mix for everything. They have a shot potentially to get to the playoff. They have a slim hopes of getting to the Big 12 championship game. They would need either BYU or Texas Tech to lose. But I think they wouldn't be able to go because tiebreaker. So I'm almost positive it is locked in, except for BYU and Arizona State, right?
Yeah.
I think BYU lost to Arizona. No, BYU lost to Texas Tech. I don't know how they're not. Oh, Texas Tech lost to Arizona State. That's what it is. So I'm not sure why. I guess if there's a 3-way tie, somehow there's shenanigans, something. I don't know. We'd have to look up that scenario. I thought that that was already determined for the most part, but I guess there's still some things to be sorted out. Your thoughts on this game, Ian?
Yeah, this was an old school Big 12 game, but with a Navy Army running attack.
Yeah.
The statistic of that is insane. The one part which was the turning point in the game for me was that pick 2 Utah had. Because if you think about it, Utah had that pick 2, and 2 things could have happened that last drive. Let's just say in general, Kansas State doesn't convert that 2-point conversion. But whatever, Utah doesn't get 2 points out of that. Instead of it being, 51-47 and them needing a touchdown and having Avery Johnson throw these big passes where you're needing, 70 yards instead of maybe 30-40, let's say, give or take, because then it would be 49-47. You need to kick the game-winning field goal. Or on the other side, if they do convert that, it's 49-49, and we're going to have overtime.
Yeah.
So still, the biggest thing, though, is
it's a 4-point swing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the biggest thing, too, is just the insane comeback in the last minutes there by Utah. I mean, for Kansas State, that's like, this is, I know, look, they have not had the season they wanted. I had them winning the Big 12. Yeah. But, you know, out of all the losses I get, you know, losing to Army was bad, and obviously the opening season loss to Iowa State, but man, you had this one, and those are the ones that hurt more because they just needed to salt it away, and Utah, they just could not put the Utes away. But for Utah, fantastic game. They avoid the upset. I mean, again, better to be lucky than good, but Utah gets away with one.
The Bucks just allowed this terrible 3rd and 20 conversion.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, moving on. Michigan, Maryland. Not going to talk about this one very much. Bit of a blowout, 45-20. Underwood looked fine. Again, they ran the ball really well. Cuzdahl had 100 yards, 3 TDs. Washington was, I mean, he had what was he? He was 19 of 39. He just didn't look that all comfortable back there. And, Michigan was able to run the ball very effectively. And, of course, the Rams scored a touchdown. And then, what is it? Yeah, I mean, the Michigan defense is strong. That's what I will say about Michigan. They may not be the best offense outside of their running attack, but they're defensively, they're able to really keep them in almost every game because of it. And, really, I haven't seen many offenses really go off on them. And most of the games that they've struggled in were ones where they made mistakes and gave the other team short field. So, this Michigan team, I don't know. I'm still not impressed with them totally because of their lack of offensive ingenuity, but they're good enough to beat teams with that defense. But I don't think they're good enough to beat a team like Ohio State. I don't think they're on that level, especially this year. So you have any thoughts on this game?
I mean, yeah, Michigan, kind of similar with Ohio State. This was like a tune-up game for the rivalry next week, but they just ran over them. They, did what they needed to do, and the defense did a good job getting the stops when necessary. And, the offense made the bigger plays compared to Maryland. They had that capability, but it was a Michigan-type game. It was always 3rd and manageable, 2nd and manageable, and they just converted on all of those. So Wolverines get the win. And, now it's a, game breaker again next week for Ohio State and Michigan.
Okay, next game we have is now they scored. Is Pitt, Georgia Tech. I mean, this game, dude, when you tuned into it early, you're like, oh, Georgia Tech's getting smoked. This game's over. But then Georgia Tech just kept coming back. They scored here, a little there. And they made it a game all the way to the very end. It was a 1-score game until Turner, who had a monster game for Pitt, broke loose to get the touchdown. And, Heinzel had a good game, but really the difference in this game was Turner. He was breaking off 20-yard runs all game. And, Haynes King, again, put the team on his back. He had over 300 total yards. And, he was great in this game outside of the 2 picks, and that 1 pick led to a pick 6. And it's a touchdown close or interception that turned out close. And then was it a pick 6 as well?
It was a pick 6.
Yeah, no, there was a pick 6, and then there was one that was really close, inside the red zone or close to it. And so he kind of, those 2 mistakes were really detrimental. If he can, if he could have avoided those, they probably would have been a lot closer in this game. And it was close, even at the very end. So it's a shame because, all Tech had to do was win this game, and they were in the ACC championship game. Now, with like what we said, I mean, we'll talk about it on Wednesday, but the standings are they're fourth, and like they need a miracle at this point to get in. So we'll see. But your thoughts on this game, Ian?
Yeah, and you mentioned it too. Those two, Haynes King did everything he could, but man, that Pitt defense, they made the most of the mistakes, the few mistakes he had. The interception, obviously, they converted on that one, and then that pick six, the 100-yard return, that was that was the real difference maker because because that one was different. Yeah, they got the interception, and then they went to Georgia Tech's 28, the first one. But that one, Georgia Tech, it was like second, third, and goal, and they were inside the 10. So at the very least, if he doesn't throw that pick, not only is it like you're at least getting a field goal and it's 35-31, completely different ball game, but you're not, you're at least getting points out of that. You're not giving it back to Pitt. But yeah, it is a shame. I mean, Tech, they really picked the worst time to have probably their worst game of the year. Yeah. But give credit to Pitt. They jumped all over the Yellow Jackets and made sure the opportunities counted. And now, they're on the inside track to the ACC championship.
Yeah, I have it in my notes, and I remember writing that down. That was the turning point in the game because, like you said, it was what is it? It was 28-14. If they score a touchdown there or a field goal, whatever, it's like 28-21 or 28-17. Instead, they go up by 21, and it's like that was it. That was like, they could get closer, but it was such a huge, monumental shift because they were right there on the doorstep, and they just couldn't punch it in. Okay, let's move on. Last one of hopefully one of the last times we have to talk about the 2025 Florida Gators, but I know, Ian, you've probably got a thing on your phone. Is that what you're doing?
Well, I don't have a phone. I just have what George sent me.
Yeah.
So my cousin George went to the game. He was at the Swamp to watch this. And in his words, that was one of the worst sporting events I have ever attended in my entire life, and we have been to a lot. And I concur. I can't really argue that. That was there's no other way to put it than bad. But what else are you going to say? I mean, this team has been dead in the water for 5 weeks now. And I remember why does this have to be the prediction I was right about? I remember when they lost that USF game, and I had on the Emmitt Smith 80s, 70s style jersey because I said this is our generation's 1979 season where they went 0-10-1. They are looking down the barrel at a 3-loss or 3-win season, which is as bad as it was since the late 70s, early 80s. And yeah, it's Tennessee, they get their win against Florida in the Swamp. They break the streak. So there's no hex against them now as this rivalry annually ends, which is a shame. But
I can now go back to that game.
The chain's broken for you.
The last time I went to that game was the last time that Tennessee had beaten them. So now I can officially go back to that game because I was going to hold out as long as I could until they kept losing, and they were losing forever. So I was like, oh, Tennessee's never going to win this game again. I'll just never go to this game. But
yeah,
whatever. I can go back to that game now. But go ahead. Sorry.
And I mean, like we mentioned, it was pretty much over after the first quarter. Like they went up 4-0. They scored on their first 4 possessions. There was no resistance, and conversely, it was 3 and out for Florida. I think it was like at the end of the first quarter, Tennessee had 225 yards and Florida had 1. It was as bad as it got. And I mean, there's been a lot of low points this year, but this is pretty close to it. To the lowest, having your rival just completely make it not even a competitive game. They kept the scoring streak alive. Yay, whatever. Anytime I see people post that, I want to just slap them over the face. I'm like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's the most worthless streak ever. But
yeah, it really is.
I mean, it's neat, but that's not going to get Lane Kiffin to Florida.
No.
Oh, we have the longest scoring streak. Come to whatever. Anyways, good for Tennessee. They were clearly the better team. They didn't fall into the trap. Florida, any hope they had was, it was a rivalry game and they would play up to it, but they're so battered. They're so demoralized. It's like, what are you going to do? The only good player they have right now is Jaden Bond. There's only so much one man can do. So
he did a lot, honestly, in that game.
He was their leading receiver. I mean, credit, he only had like 30 yards, but I mean, still. All in all, bad game for a bad season, and we got one more of this. They can salvage it with the absolute mid-off that is next Saturday with Florida State and Florida in the Swamp. So if I said that too, I was like, look, if they do beat Florida State and prevent them from going to a bowl game, I'm not saying that saves the season, but it makes me feel a little better going out of it. But I just, again, I just want it to end.
Bucks just had the most Bucks pick six I've ever seen. It was like a ball where the tight end is wide open, thrown to his hands. He bobbles it like 10 times, bobbles it right into the cornerback's hands, and the quarterback, the DB runs the touchdown. It was absurd. I don't know. He might be down because his knee is down and he's got possession. Oh, I think that might be down. Maybe this is not a pick six. I don't know. Anyways, yeah. So let me concentrate here. This game, again, the streak, whatever. It's funny. It is funny because I was at the Vegas Bowl when they got that field goal late to keep going. So it was, and it's so fitting that it was like that was only one of the two bowl games that Billy Napier went to, and it's just, it doesn't matter. You're right, because it's not a sign of a good team, because like clearly a good team, it doesn't matter. Even if you get shut out, you lose, whatever, it's no big deal. But like a sign of a good team is like, scoring a lot of points, regardless of just scoring 11 points, which they did here. And, again, you saw in that first quarter, it was the thing I only have like one note for this game. And it was 21-0 before they even got a first down. And it was just pathetic. And there was zero effort on both teams. None of these players look like they want to play. There's like no wants to like hit, no like desire to make physical contact with other teams. And so you're going to get blown out when that happens. And, like I talked to you before the start of the show, Tennessee just really, called off the dogs at halftime. They could have won this game 70-0. Like they were that good at most points with their offense. Aguilar didn't even throw the ball more than like 15 times, I don't think. And he had over 200 yards. He usually has like 400 yards of passing yards, but because they were dominating on the ground, they didn't even need to do that here. And so, this team, I'm glad this will be over. I'm just wanting to, that they can get a new coach and move on, because this is just, it's been terrible. It's not fun to watch. Like I said, I woke up this morning just pissed off, and I'm just like, man, I'm just tired of, like, it's one thing to like lose barely, like, if you get your heart broken, like last week was a good effort, like they were actually put up an effort, but this week and the Kentucky game, that's what's more frustrating, is to see a talented team just not give any effort at all. It's just pathetic. And like again with like Billy Gonzalez, I love Billy, he's been around forever and I appreciate him, but the rest of that coaching staff can go. Like those guys, they're not fit to coach, a Florida type level program. And I'll be glad when all of them are gone. Like I like Jabbar Jalouk, like running back coach, he's great, and Billy G, and like the D-line coach Chapman. That's really it. Everyone else, I'm just like, I'm done with them. I just want to see new coaches in here, and like I don't know. I'm just kind of over it. And do you have any more thoughts on this one before we move on?
And my misery. That's it.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Last couple ones we've got here. BYU Cincinnati, real good game. Honestly, it was a back and forth game where Cincinnati was moving the ball, but just could not get the field goals. They were missing field goal attempts left and right, and it was just like such a shame because if they just made like one or two of them, this game would have been completely different, and we may have been seeing some fireworks. But credit to BYU, they bend don't break in those instances instead of giving up touchdowns, and they force those field goals, and he doesn't. That field goal kicker doesn't convert, so they're able to take advantage of that. And BYU, Bear Bachmeier didn't play great, only had 127 yards, but LJ Martin, a name that you need to know running back wise, especially next year if he gets drafted. He should because he's a stud. He had 222 yards on the ground, 2 TDs, and that late TD that really sold it for BYU to win it. And Sorsby, he had a good game, 300 yards, 2 TDs, but he did have an interception that was really detrimental. But again, the Cincinnati team was moving the ball against BYU, which, hasn't really happened that much this year outside of the Texas Tech game. So Cincinnati was in this game to the very end, and but BYU wins it, though, 26-14. Your thoughts, Ian?
Yeah, and I agree. Like, Cincy had every chance to stay in this game, but BYU's bend don't break defense really came in clutch. And also the other thing too is that BYU just dominated the time of possession game, and they were able to get those turnovers too. So like the important things, obviously LJ Martin on the ground, they had well over 200 yards on the ground. Martin had those 200, and winning the time of possession battle. BYU just didn't really give Cincinnati a lot of breathing room to, run their offense and capitalize on the chances they had because they didn't have the ball enough. But yeah, BYU's defense, when they did have it, came in clutch. Sorsby did have a good game. He had the, 300 yards passing, but there wasn't much to compliment him. So it was like him doing it all, and it made it much easier for BYU to kind of zone in on the passing game. But the Cougars win. They don't, like I said, we were in the same spot last year, and I was like, do not slip up. You are, the tunnel, light at the end of the tunnel is in sight. You just have to literally walk forward. You don't need to be, dancing around here. But the Cougars get the win, and, there's just one win away now.
Yeah, they just have to beat Motel 6U
Yep.
in Provo, and I have no doubt in my mind that BYU should smoke them. UCF is not on that level in any way, shape, or form. Okay, moving on. Last two, Washington, UCLA. Again, another team with its season just needs to end. UCLA gets smoked here by Washington, and it's a shame because I felt good things about this team when they were on that 3-game win streak and Nico was playing hot. But this Washington team is just a better team than UCLA, and they proved it, drive and drive out. DeMond had a decent game. Nico was making mistakes. They had that fake field goal that turned into a touchdown for Washington. It just this season needs to end. They need to get a new coach, and hopefully they can start over because it's just sad, and I feel bad for those players, and I expect better things to come in the future years, but this was just a terrible result here, and I feel bad for my UCLA friends. But your thoughts on this one, Ian?
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's kind of similar to Florida. There's not much to kick the dead horse about. I mean, Washington was the better team. They took care of business, and yeah, by the time UCLA was putting points on the board, it was far from over. I think it was 34-0 at that point. So they were able to force the turnovers. They were able to win the time of possession. They did everything they needed to take care of business, and Washington kind of gets the layup win here.
All right. So moving on to the G5 game of the week. Take it away.
So this one definitely, kind of expected this, but was hoping Hawaii put up a better fight. And going into at least the first quarter, it was only 10-7. So Hawaii was still there. They had a really good, big drive. It was a 70-yard touchdown pass. But after that, UNLV just kicked it into another gear, and they knew what was at stake. And pretty much Hawaii has been eliminated from it. The big thing, too, is that Hawaii had 11 penalties for 100 yards. So anytime UNLV was in a bad situation, Hawaii, it was like holdings, there was pass interferences. It just was not a clean game. And UNLV just, ran all over them. I think they almost doubled or did double the total yardage. And for UNLV, simply put, for the Mountain West, this one I do know. Obviously, San Diego State and Boise State win next week. They clinch. But if either one of those two lose and UNLV beats Nevada, then they're in. So this was a crucial game for them to win, because if they lose this, it's the other way around, and they're on the outside looking in. But UNLV, if they took care of business, and if they, again, it's out of their control, but still, they have a much better shot now than they did going into the week.
Yeah, I was like, the beginning of that game, there's a lot of explosive plays back and forth. So I'm like this is a crazy game. And then UNLV just kind of like dominated the rest of the way after that first little bit. But Dan Mullen, first year in UNLV. I know they were good last year, but he took over and they haven't missed a beat. I guess the defense has really been the issue for some of these games early, but they played better in this game. But UNLV still in there for the mix for everything. So, okay, that is the show, everyone. Reach us at haterradio.com for all of our articles. For all of social media, just type in Hater Radio. It comes right up. Ian, what are your socials before we go?
At Twitter, it's at at G5Gibson. And at YouTube and Instagram, it's at G_Gator_G.
Well, Max says goodbye, everyone. So it's time for me to take them out. So you guys enjoy the rest of the weekend, and we'll talk to you Wednesday.
Miko says goodbye.
Oh, it's a pooch parade. We'll catch us at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. All right, take care, y'all.